NFL free agency is officially less than 1 week away and creeping up fast. We talk about who could stay and who could go from the Ravens in the coming days and weeks. All that and more come up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm here with you, your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you always from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, as always, and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available anywhere you like to listen or watch the podcast. So in video form on YouTube, also in audio form, wherever you get your shows. 5 days a week, Ravens content, plus bonus content as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Free agency's coming really fast. We're less than 1 week away from it. The Ravens have a bunch of decisions to make. They've already made a couple. The franchise tag Justin Madubuike. But we're going to be talking about who stays and who goes from the Ravens based off of players they had on their roster in 2023. And here to break that down with me is Rocco DiSangro of Fox 45, The Ryan Ripken Show. Ripping Rocky. He's everywhere doing a lot of work. And Rocco, I know, he's down in Florida covering Orioles spring training. So both Ravens and Orioles coverage from Rocco. But now we're starting to get into that big moment of the offseason, Rocco, NFL free agency. We talked about how all last offseason it was a super big offseason for the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. This one, it might not be as important in terms of the quarterback position, but I mean, boy, is it important in terms of either retaining guys or letting them go.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. It's a crazy time of year for football fans. It's a time of year that you either dread or you really love. If you're a Bills fan, you might dread it right now, just after all the moves they just made, just kind of cleaning house. Ravens flock, just probably thankful that's not them right now. So it can get wild. It can get crazy, but just keep your head on, right? Just enjoy it, enjoy the ride, and hope that good things happen for the Ravens going forward. As they approach free agency, like they always do, trying to put the right pieces in place to win football games going forward.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about the Ravens with Baltimore, I mean, you mentioned Buffalo there. We're going to talk about defensive overhaul in the final part of the show. I mean, talk about defensive overhaul. Buffalo just released like they're almost their entire starting secondary. They just restructured Von Miller, and every team has to get under the cap by the start of free agency. The Ravens are $10 million over now after being about $12 million under before the tagging of Justin Madubuike. We've talked about it, Rocco. Their free agent class, Baltimore's, is extremely, extremely strong. Probably one of the most talented they've ever had in their franchise history. They're going to have to be players in some way, shape, or form, even if it just means re-signing some of their own talented players. But do you feel like this is going to be an aggressive offseason for the Ravens? Do you think it'll kind of be like what we've seen over the past couple of years and even over the course of their franchise history, where they're going to try to wait out the market a little bit, see whose markets aren't developing, and then swoop in and try to get guys on bargain deals considering what maybe they thought they were going to make?
I think we need to see the Ravens definitely be aggressive, considering all the pieces they could potentially lose in free agency and how good this team was last season, and knowing how small the window is to get back to a Super Bowl, or obviously they didn't get to the Super Bowl, but to get back to an AFC championship game is what I'm talking about. They should have been playing in the Super Bowl. It's crazy to think about that they weren't there. And I know that still hurts this fan base, but I think you're going to see an aggressive Eric DeCosta. I think you're going to see him go after and approach guys he can get. Maybe some on a discount if he can get the right deals done with them, but others, he might have to spend some money to get them here in Baltimore. So I think we're going to see that kind of Eric DeCosta. He's locked in. He's ready to go. I'm sure he's very heavily caffeinated right now and not sleeping too much throughout the next couple of weeks. So he's laser focused. I always love the memes when you see DeCosta locked in, like the many men, that video especially.
So
that's like, play that on loop right now throughout this process, because he's going to be just like going after guys. like looking at the right deals possible and trying to make the best roster possible for the Ravens going forward as they try to contend for a Super Bowl this season like they should every year.
Yeah, I think Eric DeCosta, you and I have something in common, Rocco, and that's we don't sleep very much. And I know you outed me last time about when we were recording this episode. Sleep is not being had between the three of us, although we're not running a football team. Eric DeCosta has a lot on his plate, but we can talk about what Eric DeCosta might do. How different of a team do you expect for the Ravens in 2024? Because again, that class is really talented. And when you start to talk about guys, and we'll get into it, like maybe a Patrick Queen or a Geno Stone, there are levels to the percentages of maybe if a guy stays or if a guy leaves. No team is the same. We know that every team is different every single season, but just how different do you expect Baltimore's roster to be heading into 2024?
I think there's potential for it to look really different with all the guys they could potentially be losing in the secondary. You look at Geno Stone, you look at half of, if not all of, almost the cornerback room. It's like almost all those guys. You got Darby as a free agent. You got Rock Ya-Sin as a free agent. Pretty sure Arthur Millett's a free agent as well. I could be wrong there, but like those guys are just like, it's crazy to see like all the guys that are the cornerback room. It could be potentially stripped clean when it's all said and done. But here's what I will say, Kevin. You look at the key guys in the secondary. You have a Kyle Hamilton, and I know people are going to say what they want about Marlon Humphrey, but he's still there, and it's a good thing he is still under contract right now. Say what you want about how he played last season or how he didn't play, but Marlon Humphrey could be poised for a big year this season, especially as he's looked at in a much more significant role. A healthy Marlon Humphrey could be playing a much more significant role this season. Health is key, obviously, for him. The guy's a former All-Pro. But having Kyle Hamilton, having Marlon, having Madubuike on the defensive line, and then having Roquan in the middle, if Eric DeCosta can build around those guys, their core four, I would say, on the defensive side of the ball, they're right there. So you saw them last year pick up guys off the couch. You saw the Jadeveon Clowneys. You saw the Kyle Van Noys. You saw them bringing guys in the secondary, and it worked out. Defense was not the problem in the AFC Championship game. It was the offense and not running the ball. So defensively, the Ravens look great. I know Mike McDonald's not going to be back, but let's see what Zach Orr can do with these guys. And he has a good relationship, especially with the linebackers. He's well respected. He's a guy that's been there, done that. So I'm excited to see what the Ravens roster looks like this year. Change is good at times, but the fact that the solid core, the foundation is there, it doesn't worry me too much about how different or how similar the Ravens defense could look in 2024.
Yeah, you mentioned the core pieces, and I 100% agree, where I think everybody looks at how much turnover there could be, and there will be some, and say, oh, well, the Ravens are doomed because they're going to lose all this talent. But again, first of all, if you have Lamar Jackson, you have a chance. That's the first point. But then also on the defensive side of the ball, you mentioned those pieces, including Justin Madubuike, who did get franchise tag, Rocco, on that $22.1 million number. I think a lot of people were hoping an extension would get done by the tag deadline, but I think the always expected outcome of this whole thing was for him to just get franchise tag and then try to work towards an extension, hopefully before the start of free agency, but before that July 15th deadline does hit.
I look at the franchise tag. Obviously, you're going to use it if you can't come to an agreement, but I kind of view it as an extension of a negotiation for Eric DeCosta and for Justin Madubuike's camp. Because if you look at the Ravens, the 9 players they franchise tagged, Justin Madubuike being the 9th, it's 2 of them have not signed extensions with the Ravens. And those 2 were Wally Williams, and then you had Matthew Judon. The other 7, the Ravens planned on bringing back, and they were able to come to terms on long-term deals with these guys. So I expect much of the same for Justin Madubuike. I expect Madubuike to be a Raven for the foreseeable future, maybe for the rest of his career. We'll see what happens. He's still young. So it'll be interesting to see. But the Ravens aren't going to franchise tag a guy or put that tag on a guy if they do not plan on bringing him back for the foreseeable future or signing a long-term deal. So that's just something to keep in mind with Justin Madubuike and the franchise tag.
Yeah, not expecting him to go anywhere for a long time, at least the franchise tag, all but secures his services for at least 2024, with hopefully an extension coming down the pipeline. Coming up in the second part of the show here on Locked On Ravens, we'll be getting into the offensive side of the ball. Who stays and who goes from Baltimore's free agent pool right now. Stay tuned. Lots to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, your number one ride or die will always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed to Fit Your Part, it's guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn a car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed to fit only available to U.S. customers. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. There have been a lot of frustrating ticket buying experiences in my day. Sometimes I wasn't really sure if the seats were good, other times I couldn't find last minute tickets, and sometimes there's just no good deals at all. Shouldn't have to worry though when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With current last minute deals, all in prices, use your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And there are a lot of great things in the Baltimore area. Obviously, unfortunately, no Ravens games coming up, but there are going to be some Orioles games, especially opening day, which is going to be really exciting, plus concerts as well. Game Time on the app, that's super great over there too. You can get views from all the seats in the venue, plus Game Time's really taking the app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps, and there are accessible finding ways to help you save money on your tickets. With Zone Deals, pick the section and Game Time picks seats for big time savings. If you think about buying tickets with the Game Time, down the Game Time app, create an account and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time to the last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Rocco DiSangro, talking Ravens football and Ravens free agency ahead of the tampering period, which I think kind of snuck up on me a little bit, Rocco. Last offseason, I was doing and you were probably covering it too, Lamar Jackson every single day, like nonstop was Lamar. And I was doing my Friday episode, and I look up and I'm like, wait a second, the tampering period starts in like 2 days. My whole content schedule was messed up, and it didn't sneak up on me as much this time because, again, there was no Lamar to talk about. But it almost feels like we've gotten here really fast. I mean, the combine hit, and that's done. We had everything leading up to what free agency is going to be in a couple of days here. And I think for Baltimore, as we talked about, we'll get to the defensive side of the ball in the third part of the show. But on offense, the big position everybody's talking about, at least in Baltimore right now, is running back, and whether they could bring in a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs. But Baltimore has free agents at that position with their own guys, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Dalvin Cook. Now, I think there's a possibility that none of those guys come back. There is a realistic possibility they just want to reset altogether. They still have Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell whenever he comes back. Now, Spotrac, I believe, has J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards right around the 1 year, $2 or $3 million range. So that's what they would earn. I think, look, I would be fine with having both of those guys back, but for Dobbins in his case, I don't even know if he wants to come back. Maybe he just wants a fresh start after so many terrible injuries in Baltimore. And for Edwards, he's been super efficient for them, but his yards per carry dropped by nearly a yard in 2023. What's your overall take, and what are you feeling about how the running back position could look, particularly with Baltimore and the guys they have as free agents?
Yeah, I just took a look at the Spotrac market value for Gus and JK. It's Gus would be valued around 3.6, his AAV, and then JK would be like around 2.1. So, sorry, video just started. Typical like automatic ads.
I've been there.
Usually, listen, ESPN. As much as I love the app,
oh my god, yeah,
and that's not what I was on. But like, I'll be just sitting around and just a video pops up out of the blue, and it's like highlights, and it's so loud. So,
and that cuts my mic, and I think Spotrac does the same thing. The videos cut my mic out.
Yeah, I don't even know if you heard that or the people watching this will hear that, but you know what? It is what it is. But yeah, man, I would love to see the Ravens, if they could, bring back Gus Edwards. I think Gus Edwards, I mean, he had a fantastic season last year, and to bring him back, the running back room was not the problem. Injuries were a problem. You saw to Keaton Mitchell, you saw to J.K. Dobbins, but the running backs room wasn't the problem. The lack of running in the AFC Championship game, that ended up being the problem. If the Ravens would have ran the ball a little bit more and then ended up, playing into their bread and butter, doing their thing, go to the Super Bowl. We're playing the what if game right now, but I know, I'm just saying, what if they would have ran the ball? We're not even having the conversation about, should they bring Gus Edwards back or not? Because I think that's a no-brainer to bring him back cheap if you can. If the Ravens can go out and get a Saquon Barkley, a Derrick Henry, depending on what that costs him, I think Saquon would be fantastic. He's young, he's versatile, he's like a hybrid out of the backfield. He can catch passes, run the ball. His quads are massive. I mean, that's what everyone sees when he's running. So like Saquads, they call him. But I don't know, man. I think there's a lot that the Ravens need to focus on the offensive side of the ball with the running back position. But offensive line is, I really think that is the bigger factor. I think that should be the number one priority, and then focus on a running back if you can. But obviously, if you want these guys to be fits in Baltimore, if you want to bring in a Saquon or you want to bring in a Derrick Henry for Eric DeCosta, you don't want other teams to get in their ears and maybe offer them more money if you can get them. So I'm trying to play like both sides right here and think of, okay, the offensive line needs work. That is my top priority right now for the Ravens on the offensive side of the ball. And then you have the running back position. That could be a close second with the guys that are free agents right now.
Yeah, and this running back free agent class is so deep that Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are kind of like forgotten about when it comes to all these players, because even players like Zach Moss and Tony Pollard and Austin Eckler, like there's this tier of guys, and there are probably 3 or 4 different tiers of really quality players. For me, I wouldn't be shocked if none of them came back. I would be fine if they brought back either of them. And if you're an everyday on Locked On Ravens, you've heard me talk about it. I even think I mentioned it on the Ryan Ripken show. But what I feel like my prediction is for the running back room is they're going to try to go out and like quote unquote swing for the fences and get like a Henry or Barkley or Jacobs or whoever. And the most realistic of those bunch is probably Henry, just based off of timeline and what he's looking for. But then you still have Justice Hill. And then what I would expect them to do is draft a running back. It's not a very deep running back class. It's not a very good running back class either. But in the mid to later rounds, you can have as your third running back until Keaton Mitchell comes back. And then once Mitchell comes back, that guy kind of slots out and Mitchell slots in. But I don't disagree with you, Rocco, where if they have an opportunity to bring back a quality runner like Gus Edwards on a cheap deal, I'd be all for it. He's still a quality player, had 13 touchdowns in 2023. He's not washed by any stretch of the imagination, but we do know that, and I hate using the word like shelf life. I don't think it fits what I'm trying to say. But when you think about just the overall career trajectory of running backs, they tend to wear down just based off of the wear and tear they take on their bodies. Yep. And so for Gus, he's kind of getting to that point a little bit, but I don't think he's there yet. So that's something I just think is going to be interesting to figure out with those guys too. But then you talk about the offensive line. You mentioned that the Ravens could be looking at potentially 4 new starters. I don't think it's going to get that way. They have both their guards as free agent right now, or starting guards as free agents right now, in John Simpson and Kevin Zeitler. They could move on from Ronnie Stanley. They could move on from Morgan Moses. This offensive line position, though, it is an interesting one. Let's just talk about the guys who are free agents, because Stanley and Moses are still on the roster. So let's just focus on the guards. With John Simpson and Kevin Zeitler, Baltimore does have younger options. They can draft a guy in the draft as well. Do you foresee them having 2 new starting guards in 2024? Or do you think Simpson or Zeitler returns? Or do you maybe think Simpson and Zeitler return?
I think one of the two is going to return. I don't know who that's going to be, but I think the Ravens are going to try to hold on to one of those guards. Ideally, would love to have Zeitler back, because the guy is just such an unsung hero on the offensive line. Pro Bowler, but he's a silent Pro Bowler. It's like he doesn't get like the love that he should. It's like he's buried when it comes to offensive linemen, but he is so good at what he does, and his ability to protect Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's done a fantastic job. So I know the Ravens would love to hold on to Kevin Zeitler. He said it after the season in the locker room. It was like the season in review, like guys talk afterwards, locker room clean out, basically. He said he wants to remain in Baltimore. It's a great fit here, but obviously it's a business, and he kind of touched on that, and he knows that. So I'm not sure what they're going to end up doing, man, but we talked about this before, and I don't know if this is a replacement, but this is a guy to keep an eye out on, depending on what the Ravens do in the draft, or regardless of what they do in the draft, is Andrew Voorhees. I'm telling you. Yep. I mean, the Ravens drafted him for a reason. They traded back to get him in the 7th round. And this is a guy that, I mean, ended up hurting himself at the combine, still bench pressed. He's a warrior. That's a guy I'd want on my team first and foremost, but he's been sitting. I'm sure he's been just like rehabbing to the best of his ability, ready to go for this season, hopefully. So it'll be interesting to see Andrew Voorhees, like what he looks like in training camp and how well he performs, because that is a guy who could make a name for himself and end up establishing himself on the Ravens offensive line when it's all said and done, if he has a really good camp and if one of these guys or both of them leave.
Yeah, Voorhees, I think before that injury, all the mocks had him as either a late day 2 or early day 3 prospect, but obviously the injury pushed him down.
Rounder, right? Something like that.
I think consensus was like early 4th round, like maybe like in the last couple picks of the 3rd round or very first few picks of the 4th. He was a quality player, very smart football player. And they also have a guy like a Ben Cleveland, or maybe Salah steps in and takes a role. So they have young players there. I would agree with you, where I think one guy probably goes and another stays. I just don't know for Baltimore. They want to get younger on the offensive line. And obviously if you're going with that mold and maybe more athletic, Kevin Zeitler's a heck of a guard. He's a heck of an offensive lineman. But if they want to get younger, obviously Zeitler's going in the opposite direction, which is interesting to think about. So I don't know what they're going to do there. And I also don't know what they're going to do with Odell Beckham Jr., who is a free agent. He's been connected to a lot of teams, I'd say. Rocco DiSangro Anderson put out a tweet late on Wednesday night about some teams that could potentially be fits for him that do include the Ravens, but she also mentioned going back to the Rams or going to the Chiefs or something along those lines. Now for him, Spotrac has him at 1 year, $11.9 million. I think that's a bit rich for what I would pay him personally. Maybe incentives you can get up there, maybe a base salary more in the $7 to $8 million range. But in my opinion, and I said this on the Ryan Ripken show, I think the Ravens essentially chose between Odell Beckham and Nelson Aguilar, and I think they chose Aguilar.
I think you could be right, man. I really do. I don't think they're going to spend that money on Odell Beckham Jr. If it's, the market value is 1 year, $11 million. That's what, $7 million. Well, he had $15 million contract, and 18 of it was, 15 guaranteed, 18 total. It was his thing, right? Yeah. So I don't know if, I would try to go cheaper than that if the Ravens are going to bring him back. And I don't know if Odell Beckham Jr. is going to take that like hometown discount and come back to Baltimore on that, when he's a guy that's going to want to go get paid, do his thing, maybe continue on these one year deals, maybe a 2-year deal if he can. But it would be great to see him back in Baltimore. People loved him here. He embraced the community. And I know it's so much more than embracing the community, but towards the second half of the season, he really started coming into his own, and Lamar Jackson started finding him. So if Odell Beckham Jr., if we can see more of that next season, and if Austin believes that he's a good fit here again, bring him on back. I don't want to backtrack though, but here's, we talked about offensive line, Kevin. Here's what I don't want to see with the offensive line this year. And then I guess we can move on. Whatever you want to do is a rotation system again. I think that made fans and just people in general want to pull their hair out. So whatever the Ravens do, we don't want to see a rotating like carousel of offensive linemen in games, especially like 8, 10, 11 weeks into the season. Like that just cannot happen anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I've said, I think every day this week so far on this show, I said a rotation like they had, the tackle rotation. I do not believe you can win a Super Bowl doing that. And when you talk about Ronnie Stanley, we can talk about this for a second here, because I think it's important. Stanley's getting that cap hit right now was around $26.1 million. If Ronnie Stanley cannot be trusted to finish a game, if he cannot play a full game on a $26.1 million cap hit, you have to at least restructure that deal, if not just move on and take the full $50 million in cap savings. I get it was what they needed at the time. I get that they were in the middle of a season and they realized that him and Morgan Moses couldn't finish games. At least I think that. Why else would you do it if you didn't trust them to finish the games? It wasn't to get guys practice reps like Daniel Failele. It's because they knew that was the necessity for them in that moment. And to me, you have to have guys that can play full games and be consistent in playing full games. I had never seen anything like that done maybe for a game or two it happens. Like I've seen something like that, But to have it be continuous, it worked for him. I'm not saying it didn't work, but you can't go into the year again saying, okay, we're going to play 4 tackles the entirety of the season.
Ridiculous.
You just can't do it.
You need Lamar's blind side protected by one guy, one solid guy, and one solid guy only. You don't want a rotating system, especially for that, because that's a key piece on the offensive line, if not the biggest piece on the offensive line. So protect Lamar Jackson and good things will come, I'm telling you, in 2024. But the Ravens have to do it the right way, and I think they're going to. I think we're going to see much of that heading into the season. That's the hope, at least.
I do too. And what if we're talking about having Stanley and Moses back, at least what I'm hoping that was they realized that Stanley's knee injury was just too much for him to play a full game, and he's able to recover from that in the offseason, come back and play full games. Same thing for Moses. I think he was dealing with a couple of lingering things here and there. So maybe those injuries are just too much for him during the season. He rests up and he's back. But again, if those guys at this point in their careers cannot do that, you have to find somebody else that can. I 100% agree with you there, Rocco. Coming up, though, we're going to be flipping over to the defensive side of the ball and talking about if there is a potential defensive overhaul on the horizon for Baltimore. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is sponsored by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers and subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC as registered broker-dealer. We are back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens with Rocco DiSangro. I am Kevin Ostreicher. Thanks again for tuning in today and making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasts and platforms 5 days per week, so be sure to subscribe and like the video on YouTube if you're enjoying the content. Also follow along in audio form as well, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. Now, Rocco, defensively, we talked about all those offensive free agents. Defensively, I think there's even more to talk about because of just the quality of players that are going to be available here. Now, we know Madubuike's franchise tag. We don't have to talk about that one anymore. But let's start off with the other big fish here, and that is Patrick Queen. There were rumors and rumblings, especially yesterday, that there is shared interest between the Texans and Patrick Queen and a potential pairing there. Everybody's linked him to Seattle already with Mike McDonald. Feels like the writing's on the wall that Patrick Queen probably leaves, and it's unfortunate because I'm personally a big PQ guy. I think he's flourished these past couple of seasons. I think his story's awesome, but I think with circumstances, especially with Roquan being there and him having that $100 million deal, I don't think Patrick Queen's story continues in Baltimore.
I don't either, man. And I mean, the Texans would be a hell of a fit for Patrick Queen, especially with that young defense, and he could kind of anchor that defense, him and Will Anderson. That would be something. But PQ, he's like, I hoped that he would be a Raven for life just because of the way he plays. And it's so hard not to root for that guy because he played himself into the bag this season. Like he really did. And from day one, the Ravens declined his 5th-year option. And what he did, he was ticked off at first, man. He was. As anyone would be. He wanted to stay here. I truly believe that he wanted to finish off his career in Baltimore and ride off into the sunset, however many contracts that would have been for him. But it just didn't happen that way. And he was ticked off at first. He was peeved. But you know what? All power to him. He came in. He came in during the early stages, OTAs. He came in during, obviously during training camp. There was no, okay, like, I'm not coming here. I'm going to hold out. I'm going to do my thing and whatever. Like, I don't want to deal with you guys. Like, I'm going to request a trade. He didn't do that. So he's a team guy. He really is. And to see him do that and embrace this city this year especially, and just to embrace his role. Like, Roquan's Roquan. PQ's PQ. But those two together were truly one of the best 1-2 punches in the NFL. And I wish they could stay together. I hope that Eric DeCosta can find a way to keep them together. And I think this fan base would love that more than anything. But I just don't think it's realistic to do. I think Patrick Queen deserves the money he's going to get, and I don't think he can earn that money here in Baltimore. Unless if he were to take a hometown discount and do that, great. But I don't think that's what he's going to do because he's about to get paid, man. The guy just had he just had a Pro Bowl season. He played fantastic. So it's going to stink to see him go. It's going to stink to see him in another uniform. It's going to hurt this fan base a lot, but it is what it is. This is a business, and these guys know it, and the front office knows it, and that's what you get out of this.
Yeah, you cannot keep everybody. I mean, we've seen the Ravens have that happen forever, where I think with Baltimore, we can go back. I mean, every year there's an example of it. Even after the Super Bowl season, right? When they won the Super Bowl in 2013, they overhauled. I mean, they traded Anquan Boldin away, and they lost guys like Donnell Ellerbe, and Ray Lewis retired into the sunset, and so did Matt Burke, and all these guys left. Matt Judon leaves. Darius Smith leaves. They lose talented players every single season. Pretty much every team does in a sense. And for Patrick Queen, I do think that he'll continue his story elsewhere. Another player who I think will continue his story elsewhere is Geno Stone. He's been linked to Seattle with Mike McDonald. Not only does Seattle need 2 inside linebackers, they also need 2 starting safeties. So maybe those 2 go to Seattle together as some sort of package deal, whatever you want to call it there. But I also want to group in Ronald Darby and Arthur Millette into this conversation. I think Rock Ya-Sin just didn't work out. I don't think he's coming back. I think we can confidently say that one. But we're talking about like these overhauls. The Ravens still have Marlon Humphrey. They still have Brandon Stevens and Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. But you start to talk about these depth pieces like a Stone, like a Darby, like a Millette. All 3 of those guys played pivotal roles for the Ravens in 2024. And I think it hurt to see any of them go. So out of those 3, Rocco, who do you expect back and who do you expect to leave?
So say those names again. You said Darby, you said Millette, and you said Ya-Sin right there?
No, Stone. So Stone, Darby, and Millette. I mean, you can throw Ya-Sin in there too if you want to do 4.
I was just sorry. I think Stone could be gone too because of this is the season he had last year. I hope he has a season like that again. But Geno Stone, I'm just saying, like hypothetically, he can never have another season like he did last year again. And I mean, you're gonna strike while the iron's hot. You're gonna get paid, and wish him the best. I don't see Baltimore bringing him back because he's going to be too expensive. What did you say Spotrac had him as his market value? It's up there. It's up there for
3 years, 21.6, 21. So right about $7 million, $8 million annually.
I do not see the Ravens paying Geno Stone when they have Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton back there. And say what you want about Marcus Williams, the injuries. Hopefully he's healthy this year. That is the hope. But you're paying Marcus Williams all this money. Kyle Hamilton's a cornerstone of your franchise right now. Those are your 2 guys in the secondary at the safety position. You might say, oh, like, why can't you play three safeties on the field? It's like, I just don't see that happening. I don't see it happening this season with those 3 guys out there. I think it's going to be the 1-2 punch, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, let Geno Stone go make his money. And I think a lot of guys on this squad are going to be happy for him. I think if the Ravens are going to bring back anyone or should bring back anyone, based off of value, not based off of talent. Because if you're going to try to bring back someone, I would love to see them bring back Geno Stone. I really liked what Ronald Darby did here last season. I think he showed some stepped up in some big moments for the Ravens. Arthur Millette, it was funny how he came from the Steelers and came over here. And I think people started to really like Arthur Millette a lot and his play style. But I think Darby is going to be the guy out of those 3 that you could potentially see back here in Baltimore. And the reason being as well, the Ravens are going to need a corner. They don't need a safety right now. Looking at the guys that are free agents, you need to bring back a corner or do something in free agency or do something in the draft at that position.
Yeah, cornerback's also a long-term concern too, because Brandon Stevens is a free agent after this upcoming season. So what's that going to look like for them? Marlon is going to have a decision made on his contract either after next season or in a couple of years. So while Darby's not a long-term solution, he was one of the most valuable corners based off of multiple PFF scores. And again, if you like PFF or if you don't, how they graded him out, he was a very valuable depth corner, and especially with the injuries that Marlon had to go through, he stepped in as an outside corner and played really well for them. And that was a great veteran signing by Eric DaCosta, and two other great veteran signings were both Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, who just provided insane value. 9 sacks, 9.5 sacks. They were incredible. I mean, Van Noy is on his couch for like the first 3 weeks of the season, comes in and just balls out. Clowney, a lot of questions about him. He does the same thing. Both those guys earn paydays, and both those guys are going to get raises based off what their 2023 contracts were. Do you see Baltimore as a team that gives them those raises, though, Rocco?
I don't know, man. I don't. It's like if I could pick one, it would. I can't even pick one right now. But like, who do I see fit more for this team? It'd probably be Kyle Van Noy.
Well, do you want me to give you so Clowney's market value is $7.2 million annually. It's a 1-year deal on Spotrac. Is he worth that to you?
I mean, he sure proved it last season. Like, he had one of his best seasons of his career in Baltimore. He played like a monster. It was like, yeah, I mean, he played himself into that money. Yeah. Like, all right, what would Van Noy do?
I don't think Van Noy is on here.
There. Yeah. So since Van Noy doesn't have one, let's just bring him back. It's like
Clowney's such a disruptor when it comes to especially his run game presence. And we knew that coming in.
Yeah.
But he benefited from McDonald's system, and not saying that it was all McDonald. Clowney obviously is a very talented player going number 1 overall like he did. But I think for a player like him, what struck me was during the end of season press conferences, he said, this was the team, this was the year. I think he really wants, like, he values winning right now. And I think he understands what this was. And that's going to be a situation too, because we talk about money and this whole thing, Rocco. It's a good thing for a lot of these guys to get paid, and credit to Madubuike, credit to Queen, credit to Stone for having the years they did in a contract year. But for guys like Clowney, who has gotten paid, for Van Noy, who's gotten paid, if those guys, if they're saying, well, I'm going to value a Super Bowl over money right now, Clowney might not take the richest contract he gets offered, but maybe Baltimore offers him enough where he feels valued, and then he comes back to try to win another Super Bowl. And that could be the MO for some of these veterans, especially seeing what Eric DaCosta did in building this team last year.
It could be, man. And just it's so hard to pick either one of those guys.
Yeah.
Because like sack wise, you have 9.5 for Clowney last season. You had 9 for Van Noy. I think Van Noy, I really do think you could go either or when you're bringing it back. And I do agree with you with Clowney. He did benefit from Mike McDonald's system a lot. He really did. And the Ravens, one of the biggest questions heading into last season was, okay, the edge. Who's going to come in on the edge? What's the deal? You have young guys. You have Odafe, you have David Ojabo. Can those two guys really carry the load and, go forward? These young guys, can they lead the way? And Odafe, he didn't have a bad season. He tied his career high with sacks. I believe he had 5, and that was set his rookie season. So he's a guy that's trying to, I expect a big season for Odafe regardless of what the Ravens do, because it's about to be a contract year for him. So he's going to have to ball out. Maybe the Ravens rely on him. Maybe the Ravens go back to potentially relying on David Ojabo when he's healthy. But I would love to see a veteran back, whether it is Clowney or whether it is Van Noy. I think Van Noy, he's more of a glue guy in the locker room. Like, you see it. You see the interactions with Kyle Hamilton. And that goes a long way. It's not just the play on the field. It's what's the chemistry like? How well do these guys vibe in the locker room? I think Clowney, the same thing. I don't know if he's as much of a glue guy as Kyle Van Noy is. I just think you've seen Kyle Van Noy's personality more. Clowney kind of lets his play do the talking, and he goes from there. But either or, wouldn't mind seeing either of these guys. I know Ravens fans, they wouldn't mind seeing both of the guys back for another season if they can, if the price is right.
Yeah, either one would be valued then. Different skill sets, but both just incredible based off their contracts last year. And even if they had a bigger contract, I think you'd still call it value based off how either of those guys or both those guys perform there. But a really important offseason for the Ravens, an incredible free agent class that they have. Some guys are going to stay. Some guys are going to go. We're going to find out in just a few days, even with some of these restructures and cuts and extensions they have to get done as well. shuffling coming down the pipeline for Baltimore. Rocco, I appreciate you though. Thanks so much for hopping on with me. We'll do one bonus one on the way out, and then obviously please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on. Tyler Huntley, is his time in Baltimore done?
I think it is. I think it's done. I think it could be the Lamar and Malik Cunningham show, the Louisville guys sticking together and kind of doing their thing. I think so. I think Snoop could kind of see what's out there for him, see if there are any teams looking for a potential, someone to compete for a starting position, because that's what he wants. Any quarterback strives to be a starting quarterback. Right. Whether he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL, that remains to be seen. But I think the guy's talented. I think he can be a solid backup in the league, but maybe he thinks he could be a starter and kind of do his thing going forward. So I think his time in Baltimore could be done.
Yeah, for sure.
But we'll see. We will see.
It could go either way. I predict him not being in Baltimore, though. But I appreciate it, Rocco. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on here as we're coming up on free agency really quickly here.
Yeah, you can find me on X at Rocco DiSangro, or I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't know.
I am too. Don't worry.
Find me on Instagram at rdisangro. Try to post a lot of content, interviews, Ravens interviews, Orioles interviews as well. And then on Fox 45, we do Sports Unlimited, and then the Ryan Ripken Show, and then we do Rip and Rock the podcast. So I try to do a lot. It's fun. It's all in a good day's work. So then I hop on here with Kevin every week. So it's right. It's a good time.
Yes, yep. Rocco, the links to Rocco's work will be in the description down below. And of course, we'll see him right back here on Locked On Ravens soon. Rocco, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody for tuning in today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form. We'll be back right here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, rounding out the week with more Ravens content. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.